Your relationship with money matters. I'm Michelle Perkins, and this is the Money and You podcast, where I will be breaking down your relationship with money, offering tough love money tips, and a money dating plan that will focus on lifting the barriers to success to help pave the way for better money practices and increased wealth. It's time to take control to live a limit-free life. It starts today. Hello. I'm Michelle Perkins, your host of the Money and You show here at ubngo.com. And I'm super excited about today's show. We have a great guest joining us from faraway Italy. And I guess because this is the Limit Free Life sponsored show, Money and You, I'm very excited about some people who are truly living what I would consider to be a limit-free life. And of course, we talk a lot about money because that certainly gives people a leg up on freedom. And but we talk about a lot of things here, and some of them being career change, career development, business, and of course, everything impacts your money relationship. And so I'm very excited today to talk to somebody who's doing something very different, who's living his life in a very different way, who's made a career transition, and who's currently living life on his own terms. And we'll talk about money too while we're talking to him, and see how, some of the insights he's had around money. So I'm going to introduce Roger Williams. He's a writer, podcaster, adventurer, and head crosser-offer of his bucket list. After more than 30 years working in the youth development and teaching field, a year in quarantine, and 2 heart attacks, Roger embarked on an adult gap year to prioritize a life in which he's known not by his professional work, but by the way he lives his life and the people he grows relationships with. Now he's traveling around the world to cross items off his bucket list and inspiring others to do the same. Roger, welcome.
Oh, Michelle, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm very excited to have you here. I think in today's world where people are quitting their jobs and trying to rethink everything, it is you are a really amazing person for people to listen to get ideas from. And just, it's almost like a very comprehensive summary look at life's journeys and how we make decisions, how we make changes, how we accommodate new situations that we're encountering. So, and that's a human experience. So that's got to be resonating with most people, I would think. But tell us a little about your background and how you ended up here today talking to me from Italy.
So I worked in the education and youth development field for about 30 years. And during the quarantine and just thinking about my existence, I had a heart attack in December of 2020 and was just looking at my life, trying to figure out how I saw myself, where I wanted to be at this point, and where I wanted to be in the future. And a lot of that stemmed from the fact that my self-worth, I felt really tied up into how I sold my labor and who I sold it to. Mm-hmm. And I looked at that and decided that I wanted to take some time away from that and look at my life and say, okay, what are the things that are going to bring me joy and happiness? And so I started to become the head crosser off of my bucket list. I went to all my socials and changed my working title to head crosser off of my bucket list. Sat down and wrote out my list finally after 50 some years, and decided that I was going to start living out that list.
Yeah. Did you even have a bucket list while you were, before that? I mean, was that even a thought in your mind?
Yeah. I mean, I think we all kind of have those things in our head that we say, oh, I'd like to do this, or I'd love to do that. But actually having a physical list, I did not. Mm-hmm. And so that was one of the things that I decided that I was going to start off with first, is just making a list. I'd done lists in my work for many, many years. Every day had a new list, would add stuff to it in the morning, cross things off as I went through the day, and then made a new one for the next. And so I decided that if I had a list, I couldn't just keep it in my head anymore. I had to write it down, put it someplace where I always saw it. So I taped mine to the bathroom window or bathroom mirror. And so every morning I would have to look at it and say, okay, what's next? What's the next thing on my list that I'm going to cross off? And so that's really where I started trying to live out this existence of crossing things off my bucket list.
Yeah, I love that. There's such power in writing, and I think
Mm,
we underestimate that, but and there's a lot written about it and there's a lot of science behind it, but writing things down, whether it's your goals or, your lists or whatever it is enormous power in that. I mean, things start to happen as a result of writing things down. So I love that you brought up two things. One, writing it down. Two, putting it where you can see it. Because a lot of times we
right.
write things and they're under a book somewhere and that's the end of them. So,
Yeah, or they're just swirling around your brain,
yeah.
competing with all the other space with things that are going on, whether that's work, family, your grocery list. All those things are swirling around your head, and if you don't take it out of there and put it on a list, those things can get lost, or you don't think about them as often. And so, I really wanted to start this existence of bring joy to myself through the things that I did and the way I lived my life. So writing them down was key. I think the other thing that people have to think about when they're writing things down is that it's not concrete.
Mm.
Even if you write it down, I think so many times in our work culture and things, if we put it in an email or we write it down, people are like, "Oh my gosh, that's it. That's all we're just doing that." And it's like, no, 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 no. You can add, subtract
Yeah.
things to your list whenever you want to, but having that place when those thoughts come up in your head and you say, "Oh, I'm gonna go cross this off," or I'd like to do that. There's a spot for it, and so you don't have to try to keep it in your head or try to remember that you wanted to do something.
Right, right. Yeah. And I want to go back to another thing that you said, which is about kind of trading your labor for dollars, and which may not be the exact term used, but I, you know, you're experiencing, at least from what it looks like to me, a lot of freedom right now in your life, and people think that they get a job and they work, and somehow that translates into some kind of freedom in their life, down the road at some point. I think that's a bit of a myth, and I'd love for you to just elaborate a little, since we talk a lot about your
Sure.
relationship with money, on that whole idea of how you were experiencing that, trading your labor for money.
Yeah, I think a lot of times in our culture, especially in the West and America, that we go through this process of trying to find a job, and we get a job, and we have an agreement between ourselves and our employer. And the reality is that we say, okay, I'm giving you 40, sometimes maybe 50, but 40 hours a week that I'm selling to you for this salary or this hourly income. And the problem that I had with that as I looked at it and where I was finding my self-worth is that it was creeping in that time that I said I would sell my labor for, and the amount that I would sell it for was decreasing and decreasing, because so much of my work life was creeping into my own existence. I talk
Hmm.
about it from the standpoint that, if you sell 40 hours of your labor to someone to make money, and then you have another 45, if you're lucky, if you sleep 45 hours a week, 50 hours a week, we all have 165 hours in a week. And so if you subtract 90 by 165, you get 75 hours a week outside of sleeping and work that you have a life to live in. And the problem with our culture is, in our work culture especially, is that so much of that gets eaten up by, whether you're a teacher like I was and had to take work home every day, or getting text messages from students at midnight that because they needed help with something. Nursing is another one that, they work so hard all day long, work 12-hour shifts, and come home so physically exhausted that they
Hmm.
can't engage with their family or make a meal, and all they want to do is sit down and binge watch Netflix. Or just in general, people thinking about what's going on tomorrow, right?
Right.
What I'm gonna have to do tomorrow in my job. And so often we hear corporations talking about this work-life balance, like we should all have work-life balance, and
Yeah.
and that's a nice sentiment. The reality is that what we really need is work-life boundaries. If corporations and institutions cared about this, they would say, okay, you need to be a whole person, and your job isn't everything. And so once you put in your time, you're done. We need to
Hmm.
figure out ways that you can have boundaries in life and work, not just balance. Because I'm not a mathematician or I'm not a rocket scientist, but I don't know where 40 hours will ever equal 75
Yeah.
in any math equation.
Yeah.
And so there is no such thing as balance. But if we had real life work-life boundaries, corporations would be in trouble because they would realize they have to hire more people to do all the work that's required, that they require of us. If it was really going to be a fair exchange of goods and services, our work and their salary that they give us, we'd have some boundaries. And so that's all I really wanted to do, is try to set some boundaries in my life. I don't think everybody needs to, run off, quit their job and raise their retirement fund to go out in the world and experience the kind of things I am. But you should learn how to have good life work boundaries.
Yeah, I love the use of the word boundaries, because that's really, the balance is a bit of a mystery. And I've never felt like it was like the pie and everything's going to be in equal segments. It's always like, to me, it was always doing a little more of what you wanted and less of what you didn't want. But boundaries are everything. The boundaries are so important, in your financial health and in every area of life. And so learning to set boundaries and understand what boundaries you need that's really important. And, I'm sure with the career you had, I'm sure there are people listening going, well, there's nothing I can do about it. I mean, my career is what it is. This kind of a job just is that way. And I worked in finance and accounting for 15 years, and I know there were no boundaries there. We were working all the time. But what do you say to people who don't want to necessarily run off, but do want to set some boundaries?
Yeah, I think you have to look for the opportunities to create them, right? For me and my work, we had a system where students could text me right through a website. They didn't have my phone numbers. I didn't have their phone numbers. So there was good safety measures there and good safety boundaries. But it also allowed me to say I had office hours. So if they text me after 7 p.m. or before 7 a.m., they would get a message saying, these are, you're texting Roger outside of his office hours, and he may not get back to you until he's back in the office. And so it's having those boundaries of and you can create those any way you want. I hear you when you talk about it from the standpoint that there's that fear that if we don't have boundaries and we allow work, to infiltrate our other space, that we'll get ahead, that we will be able to get the promotion or get a raise. And the reality is that just doesn't really happen. And it's also not fair for corporations to expect that from us. We should be able to say, I told you I would sell you 40. You said you would give me X. And so beyond 40, we're done. Yeah. This transaction is complete. Yeah, I said the other day to someone, I said, I don't buy an Xbox or a PlayStation and expect to get free games for life. and so I think that there's that expectations that are involved that aren't realistic from the standpoint of, this being a fair, like I said before, a fair exchange of goods and services. And so, there's some risk involved in standing up for yourself and saying, I have these boundaries. I'm going to keep these boundaries, maintain these boundaries. And I think that they're fair. You might have an employer that comes back and says, well, that's, not a part of the job description. I think that's the craziest thing I had to a job description is duties as prescribed. I hate that one so much, but it's, and so they can always pull that card out and use it. And but is that someplace that you really want to be? I mean, that's the question you have to ask yourself as you're going through this process is, do I want to be someplace that respects me, right? Boundaries are about respect. Yeah. Boundaries aren't about keeping people out or keeping people away or not being involved in something. Boundaries are about saying, hey, I'm seeking respect. And so we should be able to do that in our workplace.
Yeah, it's new thinking, definitely. In the world I came up in, that would have, that probably would have precluded you from getting the promotion, actually. Right. But in today's world, it's different, and I'm glad. I mean, I think, you could take it to an extreme. I heard some stories yesterday that, were a little extreme, and I actually felt like, well, that's pushing it too far on the part of the employee. But boundaries are needed on both sides. I mean, the company, sure. I think as you're talking, I'm realizing there's so little clarity around it from the start of a job that, if they have their deal breakers and you have your deal breakers and there's actually communication around that would be different. But
Yeah, and to me, that's part of the, one of the things that I'm trying to accomplish right now is I'm out here and um, learning more about myself. I'm not finding myself. I'm 52 years old. I don't need to find myself anymore, but I'm learning things about myself and having the courage, if I have to go back into the workforce after this year, I decided to take off. I'm going to be a lot more vocal when I go into those job interviews. And I'm going to be a lot more inquisitive when I go into those job interviews. And with working with teenagers, I would always tell them, I'm like, when you go for that job interview, you're interviewing that corporation just as much, or institution just as much as they're interviewing you. And you have every right to say no, right? We get in this position where we put ourselves in that we have to spend money, we have to spend money, we have to spend money. Society tells us, get a good job, get good grades, go to a good college, get a good job, and buy stuff, and do it as quickly as possible, please. Right? That's what society wants us to do.
yeah.
And we should, especially when we're starting off, I really try to tell students, take that time to like really decide, is this the place that I want to work? Ask other people that have had jobs there. Do your research. Find out, is this a place where I want to sell my hours? Because you don't have to sell them to just anybody, right?
That's
You
right.
can say, no, I'm not interested. And, it's always good to have a job when you're searching for a job. So young people, that's a little bit hard
Right.
pill to swallow sometimes. But the reality is that you can say no. If you're not interested in the job, or there's some red flags for you, you can say no to a position. And that's a tough thing to sell folks. I mean,
Yeah.
usually they, I think the average right now is 40 to 50 grand of student debt, or just debt that students take away from college. So there's a big push and an emergency need to get that timing to get out there and have money so that you can repay some of that stuff back and start that process. And so it's tough, but you can say no to a job.
Yeah. I that's brilliant. I love everything you said. I feel the exact same way. And I'm glad that you're sharing that with your students. It's really important because I don't think they get that information too often. Even from parents, parents are freaked out too. They want their kids to, get on with things.
For sure.
Yeah. So talk to me a little about you mentioned, I hope I'm not bringing this up, out of turn, but that you use some of your retirement money for this journey that you're on now. And I love that you call it an adult gap year. I think that's brilliant. I think more kids should take gap years, and I think more adults should take gap years. Back to the career search stuff, the stigma associated with time off is kind of gone. I mean, you don't have to have no gaps in your resume anymore. I mean, all of that is pretty much old school at this point. But yeah, talk to me a little about that decision making, because clearly that was a money decision that you made.
Yeah, so I think that part of it is really understanding what a gap year is. Not very popular or well known in the United States, although Harvard has been sending the same letter to incoming accepted freshmen since 1975, saying that if you want to take a gap year, they'll hold your acceptance for you. It's a pretty big statement on the worth of a gap year. Very popular in Europe for students to take a year off in between high school and college or college and a job. And it's really designed for students to go out and find themselves. It's not about sitting on the couch at home, not doing anything, right? Or sitting in the basement playing video games. This is about going out and getting internships and doing some volunteer projects. It's a structured activity. It's not designed to be just like, I'm not doing anything, sitting back. I'm out trying to make myself better, trying to make myself more knowledgeable about myself and the world and how I interact with it.
Right.
And so I think for me, that's what I'll have to sell back to when I go, if I go back into the workforce, is that here are the things I did over the course of this year that make me a better person and potentially a better employee for you. So I'm not afraid of having that gap in there. I'm doing several things. I'm writing a book that I hope can produce something. I have a podcast that I hope produces something. I'm thinking about starting a second one.
Nice.
I'm doing things in life that bring me joy. I've started using my labor for myself during this year. And so it's not like I'm totally void of working necessarily. I'm just enjoying the things that I'm doing a whole lot more, and hopefully making myself a better person, which will in turn be a better employee after that year's over.
Right, right. And, yeah, I think anytime, I always actually secretly am a little bit happy when people get laid off from jobs because it's the only time they've had maybe in a 20,
Right.
30-year career that they could stop and breathe for a minute and even ask themselves the questions about, if they're happy or what they want or where they'd like to go next, because there's just no time while you're, especially for successful people who are so busy working. But I think that time off to think about things is so crucial. And in a way, I'm getting a little philosophical here, but it's pretty sad that we live these long lives and don't actually have more of those kinds of times where we stop and reevaluate and think.
Yeah. And again, it's that I've done this grand gesture of taking a gap year and using my labor for myself. But I think that, again, I go back to those 75 hours, right? You have 75 hours a week, and yeah, you have to go to the grocery store and you have to clean the house, and you have to do those things. But what else are you doing in those 75 hours to better yourself, whether it's for your current position or maybe it's for a different position down the road? And so that will make you a happier person.
Right.
And I think that that's the key is what are you doing in that time to bring yourself joy? And it may not be anything related to your current position, but it may be a skill that you want to learn or whatever it is, that just to take more time for yourself. I think that that's something that, whether it's our families or our jobs, we have this sacrifice culture of sacrificing ourselves for everyone else, that there's, that everyone else looks at that as a good thing.
Yeah.
And I think that we do need to learn how to take time for ourselves and be, I hate the word selfish, but a little selfish. I left my partner and my dog behind. And sometimes she misses me. They both miss me, I think. Although the dog's going to have some troubles when I get home. She may not recognize me. We'll work it out.
She will.
But,
Dogs do that.
Yeah. I was gone for a month over the summer and came home and she acted like she didn't know who I was.
Well, that was an act to make you feel bad.
Probably. Probably, for sure. She's a rescue, so she wants all the attention in the world. But I didn't leave my responsibilities behind. I also, made sure my portion of the rent was paid and and everything that I normally would do was taken care of as well. That was an expense I went through to make sure that, I wasn't damaging, my partner and her finances, that I was doing this in a way that it wasn't going to hurt other people. Right. And I think that to me is very important from the standpoint that you can be selfish in a way that benefits others. I'm going to be a better I almost said husband. Oh my gosh. I'm going to be a better partner when I get home.
Yeah.
She'll record that and play it back for me all the time. But I'll be a better partner. I'm going to be a better, son. I'm going to be a better brother. I'm going to be a better father. I'm going to be a better, maybe, person in the workforce, employee, because I took this time for myself.
Absolutely.
And whether it's a whole year or it's 5 hours out of the week, 1 hour a day, it's both the same thing. Costing me a little bit more than the 5 hours a week, but it is the same thing. It's that process of taking that time for yourself. To make yourself good. I use the expression that, when you're on the plane, they tell you to put the mask on yourself first before you try to put somebody else's on, because if you can't breathe, then you can't help somebody put on a mask.
Right.
And I think that's the same kind of thing that I'm talking about here, is that, when you're happy and joyful, that spreads. And that will multiply in the relationships that you have, whether those are work relationships or family relationships, or church relationships, or whatever they may be.
Yes, absolutely. I love that. And it's important. I mean, you're so right. It's important no matter what your situation, whether you're, taking time off from work or not taking time off from work, or if you're a stay-at-home mom, or, whatever you find yourself. People have so many obligations these days. I mean, they're taking care of elderly people, they're taking care of younger people, they're taking care of work people. I mean, it's just a whole lot of responsibility. And I do think it's super important, to stop and take that time, even for people in job transition. If you're looking for a job 8 hours a day and you're not taking care of yourself, you're going to go into the interview with tired, sort of, overwhelmed energy that isn't going to translate very well, even in that interview. So,
and I think that has a lot to do with the pandemic as well right now, that people, especially for people that were in lockdown for a really long time. I'm from Seattle, so I think it's still going on now. I don't know, but it's, that process is really weird. Everybody was staying home, or most people were staying home and doing their jobs, trying to do their jobs from work. And I think employers really saw that as, well, now you have all this free time, you're at home and you don't have to, you don't have to commute, and, it's so much easier for you. And it's like, yeah, but like you said, I've got increased responsibilities for taking care of elderly family members. And I've got a dog now that I've got to, take out 3 days, 3 times a day to walks, and, and you're trying to work with children and your partner around, and, and do the job at the same time, while, it was just so heavy of an experience. It was not, it wasn't a vacation. I don't think anybody that went through this felt like they were on a vacation. But I think sometimes because we weren't physically present at work in our office and doing those things, that there was this sense from some employers that, you're getting all this free time, you're not being watched and babysitted. You're not clocking in, and, all those kind of things. But it was stressful. It was a very, very stressful time for a lot of people. I know it was for me. As part of the reason I had a heart attack was that I was just under a lot of pressure and a lot of stress, and having to learn on the fly. And, I wasn't a video producer and a Zoom meeting manager and all those things that I had to learn. And I didn't get paid extra to learn those things to be able to perform my job. So there was a lot of stress. And I think that, it's kind of like sometimes you need a vacation from your vacation. You get home and you need to decompress from your vacation before you go back into the workforce. And I think that's what this is for me, is I needed to decompress before I went back and got heavily involved in the workforce again after this experience.
I think what you're talking about is so important. It isn't even what we had planned to talk about, but I think about Arianna Huffington's work on sleep, and how she kind of collapsed in a heap one day, and it, we have pushed ourselves really hard. We've been through a really hard thing. I mean, you were using past tense talking about the pandemic, but from what I can see, people are still kind of reeling from it and exhausted.
Sure.
And, it's, and now there's other things going on in the world that cause a lot of nervous exhaustion and anxiety. And so, I think the acknowledgement that life is actually kind of tough. We're not working the farms anymore, but we've got a whole different set of stressors and things that are really difficult. And, I think we are probably at a time when we're just sort of having to acknowledge and accept, because a lot of us don't want to accept that we get tired or that we can't push through or whatever it is. But, I think companies are having to recognize too that it's human beings that work in those spaces, or any organization for that matter. And it's about time that we understand that, I think. But
let's hope.
Yeah, let's hope. But it's a very, very different time. And I think taking the time off, stopping, even. I realize that I go to conferences a lot, and then I always schedule a full day on like the Monday I get back. And every single time, which I repeatedly do it, I remind myself, I've got to block that day out. I'm exhausted when I get back. My head's spinning from all the stuff I've learned, and it never works for me I have to do it because I schedule it that way, but it never works. So I think, self-awareness and what you're doing is creating just a really nice environment for self-awareness, but we all need to find that and do it. So let's talk a little more about, I want to kind of go back to the fun of the bucket list situation that you have going on here. And because I'm thinking too, if people are listening to your podcast, they may be people who want to take a break and do what you're doing. They may also be newly retired people who just really don't know what the heck to make of having this time now because they haven't really planned or thought about it too much. So I don't know who, like for your podcast, I'm assuming that you're telling people about your experiences with this. And who do you think would be good candidates to listen to your podcast?
Well, the great thing about my show is that it's not about me, which I really enjoy. That it's not about me. I have a single guest on every episode, drops once a week, and each guest has done crossed off a different item off of their bucket list, and we just talk about the hows, the whys of the reasons behind what they did, how they accomplished it, what some of their future goals are. So every episode is different. They're all titled with the item that was crossed off the list. So it's easy for people to look through. But, the marketer in me says everybody should listen to the show.
Of course.
Yeah. Even young people, I hope will listen to the show because it'll give them inspiration to hear about things that, they can start thinking about doing now, not waiting, right? Part of what I say about this gap year for me is that I'm making up time. Right. I mean, there are little things on my bucket list. There are grand things on my bucket list. And I could have been doing some of those things before now. And so I really hope that people listen to the show and get inspired, whether it's to do that item that somebody else has crossed off. And some of them are pretty out there. I had a woman on the show that was an artist, and she wanted to raise $1 million for charity through her artwork. She accomplished that. I have another person that collects autographs, and his number one autograph that he wanted was Arnold Schwarzenegger. So we talk about that. It's kind of all over the board, and that's the beauty of it, is that it's, whether you want to cross that item off or not, you still get that chance to listen to those other people's stories about how and why they're doing these things. I think that's a real key for people as they're creating their own list, is to listen to other people and talk to other people and say, why do you have that on your list? What's on your list, and why do you have those things on your list? Why did you choose that? Where come from? Because that can instill in you a sense of, oh, well, I have desires and needs too. Right. I have a friend who struggled putting a bucket list together, and we were talking through it, and he finally said, well, I love to play golf. I'm like, all right. And he said, and I'd love to see all 50 states. I'm like, all right, well, can we combine those two? Right. And so now his bucket list is just 50 items, one for each state to play golf in each state in the United States.
Oh, I love that.
And that's his bucket list, right? So that's great. I have another friend that she just wants to learn how to cook Thai food. So she has 10 or 15 recipes Thai recipes that she wants to learn how to cook. And she takes one a month, and she'll, goes on the internet and watches YouTube videos and gets advice from recipe websites and all that kind of stuff, goes out, buys the ingredients, and then tries it, and tries the same recipe multiple times each month, so that she can really learn to do it well. So it could be anything on your list.
That's very cool. And I love what you're saying, because I'm realizing, we have so many weird associations. I love just noticing them, but you kind of put the bucket list with the retirement years, like when I stop working and I guess theoretically have all this money or whatever, then I'll do my bucket list, which makes absolutely no sense when you're talking about this, because there's so many of these things that you can do while you're working that don't cost anything, so they don't negatively impact this wealth building or whatever that you're trying to do.
Sure.
there's so much money mindset that comes into this whole bucket list idea, as if you have to wait for some magic number in your bank account or something. It's very strange. But I love the way that you're kind of flipping this on its head and getting us to think differently about what a bucket list should mean and when you should start it and when you should be doing it. And part of what you were saying, if you don't have any time because you're working all the time, then it becomes, obviously something you can't do. And so you put it out of your mind, and then it does become this later in life idea. So I think being cognizant of that and really not allowing that. So I think you're really helping people to see, don't wait.
No, nobody should wait. You should always be living out your list, as I like to say, because that's what will consistently bring you joy. And it's people can have jobs that bring them joy. I get that. That's fine. but when you do something for yourself, right? When you use your labor, your time, and your finances, your emotional capabilities for yourself, there's greater, in my opinion, there's greater satisfaction in that. And so, was there a risk for me to go out here and, raid my retirement fund? Maybe. It depends on how you look at risk, and how you look at using that money. I'm only doing things that bring me joy. So the risk of spending that money is very little to me, because I'm going to be a better person and a happier person after I spend that money. Right. And that's, it's just looking at the money as a tool instead of an outcome. And that's what I want to do. As I want, if I spend all my retirement money this year and have to spend 20 years working, I guess I'll do that. I think that I'm building some things at the same time that'll help me recoup that. But if I don't, the risk was worth it, because there's not a lot of risk in me choosing things that bring me joy.
I love that. I think that's brilliant and a great kind of money relationship sort of conversation to be having with yourself, because for one thing, you're investing in yourself. You're building new skills, you're doing new things. All of this contributes to, betterment in the future. So, people are very different. Obviously, there are people who would just be, that'd be the last thing that they would do is use their retirement. And there are people who will very much resonate with that. So again, these money decisions are personal decisions, and I one thing that really bothers me about the whole financial industry is the rules, and everybody has to, follow a particular formula, which doesn't make sense to me. What is your book about? Would you like to tell us what you're writing? And
oh yeah, I can real quick. I'm writing a memoir that deals with the lack of bonding my dad had with his father, the struggles that caused him to bond with me, and my choice to build better bonds with my son, all through the lens of professional wrestling.
Wow.
Because we're all three professional wrestling fans, or in my dad's case was, but we're all three wrestling fans, and so different bonds were created through that. And so I'm going to talk about those things and the struggles that my dad and I had compared to how I'm trying to build bonds with my son, and using the history of professional wrestling and our love of professional wrestling to convey that.
Oh, so interesting. I love that. And did you intentionally decide to write it while you were doing this time off?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I actually have 3 book ideas in my head.
I love it.
I wound up settling on this one. But the other 2, I think, are eventually going to come as well. But I knew this one has been in my head for a while, and I wanted to get it out. And so I'm currently on a 3-month trek around to 6 or 7 different countries. But I took 2 months in Italy, specifically in 2 different cities, to spend the majority of my time writing.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So fascinating. So when you went on this journey, it wasn't just to, it was to do multiple things, really, that you probably would have not had time to do at home.
Yes. Yeah. And the first thing I did when I decided to have a bucket list life, something that was on my bucket list for a real long time, was to walk the Camino de Santiago, which, if you're not familiar with, is a 790 kilometer trek across northern Spain. And so I spent 2021 saving up money so I could buy my tickets, so I could buy my equipment, so I could reserve hotels and all those kind of things for the trip. And um, that was a big deal for me. I wanted to have something that I crossed off my list that was um, big and audacious. I haven't always been the most disciplined person in the world as far as my money and my time and all those kind of things. So that was a big goal for me, is to do that trip. So I took that trip, and one of the reasons that I did it was to build new relationships with people from all around the world. I knew that if I went on this 35-day trek, that I would meet new people. And so one of the other things that I've stacked on top of this trip I'm currently on is visiting with some of those people that I met along the way. So I think so far I've visited with 16 or 17 people that I met along the trip, and have hopefully about 6 or 8 more to go before I get home. So I wanted to keep those relationships going and build and continue to grow and build them and maintain them. And so that was pick some of the locations I visited based off of that. My first week on this trip was in Costa Rica, where I crashed 2 friends from the Camino's wedding. They had a small destination wedding in Tamarindo, Costa Rica. And so I showed up at the wedding unannounced, and they loved it. So it was a lot of fun. But yeah, so I try to stack things as much as possible. That kind of helps with the financial issues, that I get to do multiple things at the same time.
Yeah. Oh, so fun. And I kind of love what you brought up about not having been so disciplined, because it sounds like you're pretty disciplined now while in this, kind of new structure that you've got.
Yeah, I think I definitely like to plan things out. It's not like I'm just like, oh, where am I going tomorrow? Where in the world is Roger? That's not what this is. The trip was very, very planned out. I had bought all my plane tickets, all my Airbnbs before, like several months before I left. But I think for me, the real thing is that as I started living this bucket list lifestyle, is that I find that there's lots of things that I encounter and get to do that I never had on my bucket list. I took the train into Milan to visit with some friends, and I got off the train and was in the train station. There's huge banner hanging from the ceiling that was about a Banksy exhibit, the street artist Banksy, and it had an exhibit in Milan. I was like, oh, I could do that. That's so cool. We're doing that. whatever you all have planned, I'm doing this. You can come with me. That'd be great. But I'm doing this. My father passed away while I was on this trip. And so I had to go back to his funeral real quick to the States. And I didn't have a suit. And so I, got out the old Google machine and found a tailor in Trieste, Italy, and walked in, and he's like, when do you need the suit? I'm like, 4 days. And he kind of chuckled and he's like, let me see what I got on the rack. And he pulled this beautiful suit off the rack and put it on me, and it just about fit. And he's like, I'm going to make some alterations, but you can pick it up in 3 days.
Wow.
And, I love having a tailor-made Italian suit that fits real nice. It makes me look really good. But I never had that on my bucket list. I never had that on my bucket list. Yeah. I'm in Matera, Italy right now, and I was walking around the town second or third day, and I started running across these 6 Salvador Dali sculptures that are just out in this town for whatever reason. I get to sit there and look at this amazing artwork from this amazing artist who's Spanish, and here I am in Italy. They've got these works, like there's signs and maps on how to do a little route to see them all and stuff, and it's just like I never would have thought to have those things on my bucket list. But now that I'm open to whatever corny it is or not, what the universe has for me, I get to do things that I would never have expected to or imagined.
Ah, that is so great. And it's just such a testament to the fact that we don't know what we don't know. Like you got to
That's
get out
right.
there and live and see things and meet people and, the world will really open up to you. So, yeah, not that we don't have to work, but I think that you're doing a great job showing that life is more than just work. And when you come back, you'll figure that out, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
And that's so good for people, I think, to see that that's a way to do it. It's an option for you. We're going to have to wrap up here in a minute, but can you tell us, I'm sure people would love to listen to your podcast. I would love people to listen to your podcast because, again, with everything you're talking about, these are ideas, these are insights and new ways of thinking, and that's everything, So getting to know yourself and then shifting your perspective to see new ways of thinking will really transform your life. And so you're kind of doing both and showing people how to do that and giving them ideas as well. So talk to us about your podcast and when people can hear it, how they can find it, all that good stuff.
Sure. It's available just about everywhere. It's called the Crossing It Off podcast. Real simple. You put that in the Google machine and it will give you lots of different options on how to listen. You can also listen to it on your phone on Facebook mobile now. You can go to facebook.com/crossoroffer and it'll show up and you can listen to episodes there. Drop episodes once a week. Every Friday morning at 6 a.m. Eastern time. So it's available all day Friday. Folks can listen to new episodes each week. And it's available Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you listen to podcasts, it's there. And then if you want to follow my adventures, then you can go to Instagram, where you can find me at crosser.offer. And I post pictures from my trips and things that I'm doing. I recently got knuckle tattoos, so I posted those. So you can kind of follow me as I cross off items off of my list, and also get information about the show and when new episodes drop.
That's great. Well, thank you. And thank you for doing that because you chronicling this and inviting other people who are crossing things off their bucket list is really, entertaining. It's fun, but it's inspiring as well. So
yeah, I love doing it. It goes back to whatever brings me joy, and the show really does bring me joy. I love getting the chance to help other people tell their stories, cross stuff off their list. It's just a lot of fun for me.
Yeah. I don't actually expect you to go back to your old job, but if you did, you would certainly have probably some different information for people too. So that would be kind of interesting. But, well, Roger, thank you so much for joining us. You are far away and it's late and it's been an honor to have you here. And, I think people who are doing the kinds of things you're doing are living a limit-free life. And I think it's inspiring for people to see and hopefully they'll take away some of it and make some changes themselves. I think we all need some change.
Thanks, Michelle. Yeah, appreciate the time and if there's everything I can do for you, let me know. I'll be glad to. I love what you're doing too.
Well, thank you, and we'll keep in touch. And yeah, I really appreciate it and can't wait to see, watch what happens. So I'll be watching your podcast as well, watching. So thank you. And listeners, thank you. Thank you for joining us. We are here every Monday at 7 o'clock at ubngo.com. And then after that on all the podcast platforms where you get your podcasts, on the Limit Free Life YouTube channel, Limit Free Life Facebook page. Please pay attention, listen to the show. There's some great information here. And I really hope that you've had some takeaways from this and from Roger today, because I think we can all learn. I know I've learned something from him here, and I hope that everybody, has an idea or two that they can implement from this. So if you want more information on what I do, you can check out limitfreelife.com. There are some free offers there, a career change kit, some money mindset, decision-making kind of information, all free, and you can grab that, some productivity information, and check it out. See if you need any help to live your own limit-free life, and you can certainly connect with me there. So love having you watch the show. Please subscribe, leave reviews. We love that too. It keeps the show going, keeps us bringing great guests like Roger onto the show every week. So thanks again. We'll see you next week.